Medieval bedroom secrets. The untold side of the Dark Ages. According to the Church, during the Middle Ages, sex was not an act of love, nor was it meant for pleasure. It was seen purely as a tool for reproduction, a means to ensure the continuation of mankind. Therefore, sex was only permissible under one condition: within the bounds of marriage. It could be years of hard labor, public shaming, torture, or even death by stoning. In simpler terms, a man and a woman were only allowed to love each other if, and only if, they were husband and wife. Any form of sexual activity outside marriage, whether before or during someone else's, was considered a grave sin, and the punishment that depended on the circumstances. The nobility embraced these strict religious laws with enthusiasm. Why? Because they wanted to guarantee that their heirs were truly of their own blood. Among commoners, however, enforcement was more lenient. If a couple was caught in the act, the punishment was often to get married immediately. Once they married under the eyes of God, all past sins were forgiven. If marriage wasn't possible, say, if one or both were already married, then they might only face a few years of public penance and community service. Seeking pleasure was a sin. Any sexual position beyond the standard, man on top, woman below, was considered unnatural. Her punishment: 3 years of oral sex, obviously not aimed at procreation, was also a punishable offense if discovered, with both parties facing years of religious atonement, as sex was believed to be only for reproduction. Any attempt to seek pleasure was shameful and sinful. If a woman dared to get on top, she was guilty of disrupting the natural hierarchy between the sexes. The Church even categorized sexual positions into 3 groups: acceptable, forgivable, and absolutely forbidden. The deadliest sin: homosexuality. Homosexuality, according to church doctrine, was against nature and had to be eradicated. Starting around the 12th century, the church imposed horrifying punishments: burning at the stake, death by torture, or being caged and left to starve. These liaisons were hidden with utmost secrecy, often disguised under traditional marriages. Their wives were expected to tolerate cold, loveless unions for the sake of reputation, while their husbands pursued same-sex lovers behind closed doors. Yet many historical figures, kings, nobles, even priests, were known to engage in same-sex relationships. Medieval men and their fashion statements. One of the strangest fashion trends of medieval men was the codpiece, a pouch sewn into the front of their trousers, stuffed with fabric or sawdust to exaggerate the size of their genitals. The goal? To flaunt their virility and fertility. In addition, they wore long, pointy shoes. The longer the tips, the greater the implied size of their manhood. These trends are clearly visible in paintings by Dutch master Peter Bruegel. The Church believed that remaining celibate for life was the ultimate way to serve God, especially for women. Following the model of the Virgin Mary, through confession, 5 years of penance, and permanent isolation in a convent, a woman could reclaim spiritual virginity, as long as she renounced all romantic and sexual ties for the rest of her life. Medieval toys for women. Historical evidence suggests that some medieval women used phallic-shaped objects, often homemade, to satisfy themselves sexually. The Church, of course, condemned such behavior. Women caught doing so were ordered to repent for 5 years in harsh penance. The cult of virginity in medieval Europe. Virginity was sacred, but not everyone succeeded. Those who had lost their virginity, even married women or mothers, were given a chance at rebirth. Through confession, 5 years of penance, and permanent isolation in a convent, a woman could reclaim spiritual virginity. As long as she renounced all romantic and sexual ties for the rest of her life, the golden age of prostitution. Despite the church's opposition, prostitution thrived in the Middle Ages. In fact, the church at times quietly tolerated it, believing it to be a necessary evil to prevent adultery and homosexuality. They were well-dressed, lived luxuriously, and entertained wealthy, powerful clients. Their work was seen by some as legitimate business. High-class courtesans operated discreetly in private homes. Meanwhile, public brothels flourished in towns and cities, with designated uniforms and official status. Rural villages had smaller versions, often just one per village. Freelance prostitutes, however, were treated as outcasts, beaten, imprisoned, and brutally punished if caught. Medieval birth control. Early forms of condoms were developed, made from animal intestines or fish bladders, tied on with string, and reused multiple times. Initially, they were designed to prevent venereal diseases like syphilis, but eventually they were used to avoid pregnancy too. Though condemned by the church, contraception was not completely criminalized. Women also brewed their own spermicides, mixtures of honey, date pulp, and acacia bark. These were soaked into cotton and inserted into the vagina before intercourse. Crude, yes, but surprisingly effective. A team of experienced older women would then investigate. Literally, no shame, no scandal, just an early medieval version of divorce. The sex trial, proving a man's ability. If a medieval husband couldn't perform his marital duties, his wife could report him to local authorities. If he was proven impotent, the marriage could be the chastity belt. Not just a myth shaped like an iron undergarment with holes for basic bodily functions. They were locked around a woman's waist and pelvis. Chastity belts weren't just a legend or a joke about jealous husbands. They really existed. Soldiers and nobles going off to war or long hunts would strap these on their wives to keep them safe, or, more accurately, to ensure no one else could touch them. Later on, chastity belts became symbols of female honor and were crafted with luxurious materials, gold and silver, reserved for noble women only.